Good morning, it's Wednesday the 24th of January here in London. This is the Bloomberg Daybreak Europe podcast. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Coming up today, Donald Trump beats Nikki Haley in New Hampshire and cements his status as the likely Republican presidential nominee.
The CEO of Alaska Air says that loose bolts have been found in many of its Boeing jets, in more bad news for the plane maker.
And Apple's fork in the road. Bloomberg learns the tech giant is dialing back its ambitions for a self-driving car.
Let's start with a roundup of our top stories.
New Hampshire voters have handed Donald Trump another decisive victory in his bid for the Republican presidential nomination in the United States. Nikki Haley came in around 10 percentage points behind Donald Trump and insists the race is far from over. The next primary will be in her home state of South Carolina, where she's polling 30 points behind the former president. Republican political consultant Rick Davis says things don't look good for the former UN ambassador.
I think it's a pretty good shot across the bow that Donald Trump gave her tonight, because if she doesn't get out, she will face the most brutal assault on her campaign in South Carolina that you'll ever see. All of MAGA will descend upon that state, and they will brook nothing for her in this regard. So we've already seen how he plays, and he plays hardball.
Rick Davis is a partner at Stonecourt Capital and a Bloomberg Politics contributor. Trump's emergence as the clear frontrunner gives Biden a chance to drive home his argument that the race is a choice between him and the Republican rather than a referendum on his presidency.
Now to corporate news. The CEO of Alaska Airlines says that he is disappointed and angry with the standard of Boeing's quality control. The plane maker is facing deep scrutiny from regulators and customers after the midair blowout of a door panel on an Alaska Airlines flight earlier this month. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter has the story.
This comes after CEO Ben Menicucci says Alaska found loose bolts on many of its Boeing 737 MAX 9 aircraft. This is the same condition attributed to have caused the mid-air blowout of a panel on one of its planes earlier this month. He says he is more than frustrated, telling NBC his demand to Boeing on what it is going to do to improve the quality of in-house quality control. Meanwhile, Boeing CEO Dave Calhoun is set to meet with senators in D.C. today and tomorrow. Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Radio.
And the bad news just keeps on coming for Boeing. United Airlines CEO Scott Kirby talking about this also, as you were just hearing there in Ed Baxter's reporting.
Netflix has seen its fastest growth in subscriber numbers since the pandemic. The streaming giant signed up 13.1 million viewers in the last 3 months of 2023, beating analyst forecasts. Netflix says more than 23 million people are now using its cheaper service that includes ads. Co-CEO Ted Sarandos is hoping to boost advertising revenue further.
Live event programming is something we've talked about for quite a while, and this has been in the works. So you should look at this as fits inside of our $17 billion programming spend now. I would not look at this as a signal of any other change or any change to our sports strategy.
Ted Sarandos there speaking after Netflix announced a 10-year deal to offer live programming from World Wrestling Entertainment starting next year. The platform's strong performance is in contrast to many of its competitors, which are operating shrinking cable networks and unprofitable streaming services.
Rishi Sunak's authority has been dealt a fresh blow by a senior Conservative MP who is urging him to resign or face an electoral massacre. Simon Clarke, who rebelled against the Prime Minister's Rwanda asylum bill, is calling on him to step down ahead of the next election. The former Levelling Up minister said in a commentary piece in The Telegraph that Sunak has gone from asset to anchor.
Turkey has formally approved Sweden's accession to NATO after months of deliberations, leaving Hungary as the lone holdout. Turkey's parliament voted 287 to 55 to accept the application that Sweden first made in 2022, along with Finland, to deter any aggression from Russia following the invasion of Ukraine. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan is expected to sign the legislation in the coming days. The move puts the Nordic nation on the cusp of realising its goal of becoming the 32nd member of the North Atlantic Treaty Organisation and will bolster NATO's northern reach.
Apple is dialing back the features on what was supposed to be a self-driving car and delaying its launch. After reaching a make-or-break point in its decade-long quest to release a vehicle, the tech giant pivoted to more basic driver assistance capabilities akin to current Tesla models. According to people familiar with the matter, the release date continues to slip, with the earliest timing now expected in 2028, roughly 2 years after a recent projection. Bloomberg's Ed Ludlow says that internal movement at Apple has affected the project.
It started out with the idea that this was going to be super high-end, almost fully autonomous with a high price point. But it's just seen high turnover of leadership and executives in the team working on it, little progress. And what we understand from sources and Bloomberg's Mark Gurman's reporting is that there were meetings over a big chunk of 2023 between the board, Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, and Kevin Lynch, who leads the car project alongside the Apple Watch, where they basically said, we need some progress here. And the net result is this rethink of scaling back of both the timeline, but also of what the end product will look like.
Bloomberg's technology reporter Ed Ludlow there. Automotives will be an entirely new category for the California-based company, which could help drive growth after revenue suffered from a maturing smartphone industry and also the slowdown in China last year. Now, in a moment, we'll get more on the latest challenges facing Boeing. But another story that caught our eye this morning, Bloomberg's been looking at the Trump-related stocks that have seen a jump as he moves closer, basically, to the Republican nomination. Quite interesting, the names that have been picked out.
Yes, they include the likes of PSQ Holdings, which is an online marketplace that says it caters to, quote, freedom-loving Americans via its website Public Square. Its shares jumped by 25% on Monday. Funware, which is a money-losing software company that designed the app for Trump's 2020 campaign, its shares have climbed over 400% this year to 43 cents a share, I should point out as well. And then there's Digital World Acquisition, which is the special purpose vehicle that has the planned merger with Trump Media and Technology Group. That's been held up for more than 2 years by regulatory issues. Its shares surged by 88% on Monday, jumped again on Tuesday. It's up by more than 190% this year as well. Now, our colleagues are describing this as a speculative boomlet.
Boomlet. I like that, Boomlet. Yeah, I mean, they're a little bit obscure.
Yes.
They're not very big companies. They don't have a huge amount of revenue. So it is quite interesting. I suppose the counterpoint to that is that a lot of the market really understands that he's the front runner for the Republican nomination. So maybe not much has changed. And then in the background, of course, the rest of the market kind of thinking about this really as background noise still, even though we're getting closer to the real race. Yeah,
indeed. So interesting to reflect on how markets are considering this as we turn to get more details now on Donald Trump appearing to be on the cusp of clinching the Republican presidential nomination after he beat the former ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, in the New Hampshire primary. We've got Bloomberg senior editor Bill Ferries with us for more. Bill, how decisive was this win for Donald Trump?
It's definitely a solid win. I think the last results I saw had Donald Trump up by 11 or 12 points over Nikki Haley. And that could be, in the end, a high watermark for her. She was going to benefit from independent voters and unaffiliated voters, so basically people who are not necessarily Republicans being allowed to vote in that primary. That was expected to boost her support. But in the end, when you look across the demographics and the ages, Donald Trump won pretty handily in pretty much every category. I mean, you look across age groups, he did particularly well with the youngest voters and some of the oldest voters. Demographics in terms of working background and other things like that, he did very well. I think Nikki Haley won in one category, and that was, I think, college-educated white voters. So, she came within striking distance in some ways, but I think the road gets much more difficult from here. And starting in late February, early March, the calendar accelerates in a way that's not to her advantage.
Okay, what do we think it might be next then in terms of what happens for Nikki Haley?
Well, the next big primary is in her home state of South Carolina. The polls show her losing by as much as 30 points right now to Donald Trump. I think she goes there, tries to spin her second place finish as a sign that there's still a lot of dissatisfaction among Republicans with Trump. I think, if you look at the two primaries, he got a little bit over 50% in both of them. So that does show that for a former president, there's a lot of people out there looking for an alternative. And one of her main donors, the Charles Koch and family, have said that they'll continue to support her, so she'll have some money. But that's a huge gap, 30 points. And then just 10 days later, you have a Super Tuesday primary in early March with, I think, more than a dozen states. It would be an incredible political comeback for Nikki Haley or anyone to be able to still be on their feet after that.
So in the absence of some sort of comeback of that description, if Donald Trump does go ahead to win the Republican nomination, is it really Joe Biden he's going to be facing? There are some calls for Joe Biden to hand on the torch to a new generation.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be Joe Biden. I mean, I think Joe Biden had one challenger in the New Hampshire primary, Congressman Dean Phillips. He basically, it was not even close in terms of the voter support there. There's really no other candidate at this point. I think Joe Biden and Donald Trump are already, when you look at their press releases and you listen to their aides, they're both talking about this as a two-man race heading into November. Donald Trump wants to be done with Nikki Haley, and Joe Biden is focused on Trump as his biggest opponent.
Wall Street have been pretty grudging about another Trump term, but they perhaps do seem to be warming to the idea now.
Yeah, at some level. I mean, they realized what happened in 2016 when I think Trump shocked a lot of people by winning. You heard, I think, even Jamie Dimon recently saying that he thought Trump was right on some things and that Trump's supporters have been scapegoated by some Democrats. Listen, I think they're going to position themselves, they're going to hedge themselves for any possible reality after November. And right now, it looks like Donald Trump is very much a real possibility.
OK, Bill Ferry is our senior editor. Thank you very much for bringing us up to date with that news out of New Hampshire this morning. Donald Trump winning over Nikki Haley.
Now, to the Boeing story. The Alaska CEO, Ben Minucci, expressed anger and frustration at the company, telling NBC that the airline found loose bolts on many of its Boeing 737 MAX 9 aircraft. Now, the airline is carrying out those inspections after a safety accident on the 5th of January that saw a panel on one of its planes blow out midair. Joining us now to discuss is Bloomberg aviation reporter Danny Lee. Good to have you with us, Danny. Some very frustrated airline CEOs. How worrying are these discoveries, though, of loose bolts on Boeing planes?
Yeah, good morning. So it's the focus is on the MAX 9 aircraft again, and through the inspections that Alaska Airlines has done, it's found loose bolts in many planes, and they have several dozen of the MAX 9s not in service, but now grounded. And so with these inspections, it does raise the questions that through the deliveries that have started from the very beginning, it does raise questions over the constant quality product that is being produced out of Boeing's factories for a period of time then when you find loose bolts in many of your aircraft. And it does come as a whole heap of news on Boeing overnight emerges with especially very angry CEOs and Boeing on the defense once again.
Yeah, I mean, this news from United that they're no longer counting on the biggest 737 MAX model to be part of their fleet, not cancelling the order for the MAX 10, but still casting doubt over it. That's the sort of signal that Boeing really doesn't want to be getting at this stage.
Yeah, and for the MAX 10, the largest of these single-aisle jets, that it's still 5 years behind its certification. And again, ongoing doubts about that process as it tries to get this certified. And then for United, also not counting on the MAX 9s to be delivered this year, and that's 31 aircraft. So that could be a big chunk of change for Boeing. Also, it does speak really to the frustration of airline CEOs who cannot plan around their operations, their schedules, if they don't have an aircraft product that they can put into the skies safely.
Boeing's share price down about 18% this year, reflecting deep investor concerns. What is Boeing doing to alleviate the crisis?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think Boeing is very much on the back foot, not just with the airlines, the customers that it has now disrupted with this MAX 9, and also with these recommended checks that the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, has asked for the 737-900ER as well. But with Boeing CEO, he's going to Washington. He's going to meet with senators on Wednesday and Thursday. So this is very much him, Dave Calhoun, trying to appease and meet with politicians to try and make sure that Washington is very much in the loop on what is going on. And because we hear constant developments on Boeing at the moment, and it doesn't necessarily give rise to the fact that everything's all under control at the moment.
Danny, what is going on with the FAA's investigation into this, and as they've expanded it into other 737 models as well?
Yeah, so the airlines are very much doing what the FAA has instructed in doing checks on their planes and submitting the data to the FAA to see what agreement between the FAA and Boeing there will be on getting the procedure fully in place to then make the checks satisfactory, if there needs to be any fixes, and then get those planes up into the air. But we've already heard from the regulator saying that they may well expand their probe into other, even more Boeing models, and as their scrutiny widens into this whole idea of manufacturing practice and quality.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, your morning brief on the stories making news from London to Wall Street and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed every morning on Apple, Spotify and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning on London DAB Radio, the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day, right here on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.